Okay, we're back from Micah 5:2. The booklet reads, "But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting." He says, this is a prophecy of the Lord Jesus Christ, and the verse tells us that he had no beginning. As the second member of the Trinity, he is eternal, or from everlasting, but not in most modern translations. And then he quotes some here, which of the five he quotes, only one of them is from the main five that I talk about, which is the NIV. So let's take a look at that. The NIV at the end says, "whose origins are from of old, from ancient times." The King James, of course, says, "whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting." The New King James says, "whose goings forth are from of old, from everlasting." Reads the same. The New American Standard 95 says, "his goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity." The ESV says, "whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days." One thing before I start talking here, I want to show you in the 1611 Micah 5:2, they have a margin note there that I want to share with you. Can you see it? "Whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting." They have a cross in front of "from everlasting," and the margin says, Hebrew is the days of eternity. The days of eternity. So, not that, again, whether they would have translated it, "been from of old, the days of eternity," instead of the way they did, the meaning is not changed. It'd just be a little harder to understand. But I want to address something, because I know the NIV is oftentimes attacked for things like this. I want to share with you something regarding this passage. Do you know who Dr. Ken Barker is? He was the general editor of the NIV Study Bible and executive director of the NIV Translation Center. Well, he printed a book titled "Accuracy Defined and Illustrated." Anyway, well, he addresses this Micah 5:2 passage, and I just want to share with you what he says. "The NIV translators were not careless in the handling of Old Testament messianic prophecies or of any other doctrines, but good, godly, spiritual scholars differ on the interpretation of certain biblical passages. For example, the Hebrew text at the end of this verse can be translated either, 1, whose goings out are from of old, from days of eternity, or 2, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Those who prefer the first rendering naturally use it to argue for the eternity of the Messiah. Those who prefer the second translation believe that the expression refers to the ancient origins of the Messiah in the line of David, as indicated in the Davidic covenant of 2 Samuel chapter 7, and in the tribe of Judah, Genesis 49:10. The majority of the Committee on Bible Translation felt that the context favored the second view. Bethlehem ... of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel. Note the emphasis on the origins of the future Davidic ruler in the Davidic town of Bethlehem. So we put the second rendering in the text and the first one in the footnotes as an alternative. Incidentally, those who favor the second translation still believe in the eternity of the Messiah, and so in the eternal Son of God, and believe that his eternality is clearly taught in other passages, particularly in the New Testament. And that's on page 61 of his book, which was printed in 1995. So there you have it. The first rendering, he said that you could translate either whose goings out are from old, from days of eternity. That would be in line with what the King James margin said about, days of eternity. So if they would have translated it that first way, it would have matched up with what the margin note says on the King James 1611. But they did put that in the footnote, they said, showing that it is an alternate rendering. But they said they chose the second one because instead of it focusing on the eternality of the Son of God, the context of the passage was focusing on the Messiah himself, which would have been born of David, of Judah, and so forth. So, is there some grand conspiracy to deny the deity of Christ? There's no evidence of that in this passage and with this translation, and then with the notes of the translators themselves explaining why they chose what they chose. Again, like all the other passages, the evidence just isn't there to support the claims of the King James only side. Our next passage we're going to look at is Isaiah 14:12. Isaiah 14:12.